Okay. We could have everybody's attention. Um, Ms. Healy, your at this point in time, I think what we would, and I need to give our media, we're on? Okay, so we are on camera, just so you know. And so at this point in time, I believe what we want to do is on our side is start asking some questions of the board and have a dialogue. And I'm sure there will be some questions that will require some follow-up. And Dr. Benson and the school board can get back to us through Tom Foley as appropriate in the next week or so. So with that, who on our board would like to begin? Okay, Mr. Cohen. Oh, and I do have one other thing. We can only have about 3 microphones on at one time, so just kind of be cognizant of that. Otherwise, it creates a little wrinkle in the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening. Just real quickly, and I have about 2 pages of questions, which I'll send to Mr. Foley to ascertain, since we have a very limited amount of time, and I don't want to be the one that takes all of it. But I just want to start with one basic question. You started, and I'm not throwing my good friend and former neighbor, Mr. McCosker, under the bus, but but it was said very early on that there was a fair market-based compensation, but I didn't see anything in there for administrative assistants who have long been trying to get fair market-based compensation. So I'm just wondering if it's fair market-based for certain individuals, but others are sort of told, wait till the end of the line.
I'll take that question, Mr. Cohen.
Well, for the benefit of the public, we have heard that some people can't hear our comments, so if you could please make a special point to speak into the microphone, that would be
Okay.
great.
Mr. Cohen, in my opening remarks, I did note that we made progress with the teachers, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, and bus monitors. But I did add, however, there is much more that needs to be done to meet our goal of fair market-based compensation for all employees, not just in these categories, but in other employee groups as well. And we are working on that. We have actually asked Dr. Benson to commission a study of the employee groups, correct? And that will let us know where we are. We are not singling out the administrative assistants. We certainly recognize they are one of several groups that we would like to address.
Okay, so in other words, it's because I could have sworn that many years ago you did, one of the first things that the superintendent did when he came on was push for a study. That's how we had found out about different other categories being so deficient. So their time will come is to take a song lyric.
Well, as you know, we can't do it all at once. I mean, you can see, even with what we're trying to do, we recognize that the numbers are just high. They would be astronomical if we
Right.
tried to do it all at once.
And then the
If
second
you'd like us to
question.
take that on, though, just
Well, no,
give
and
us- give
I
us
just
the,
right, and there's a certain amount of priorities, and I just want to make sure I understand that the 86.5 positions that are being sought for next year include the positions from last year. And if I went on the website this weekend, and there were 48 teaching positions that are not filled, 12 paraprofessionals, and 2 psychologists. So it's the 86.5 plus the ones that we have not been able to fill since the beginning of the school year, correct? And or people who left in the middle of the year. So I'm getting a couple nods.
I'm going to
so-
defer that question to Dr. Benson because I don't have any personal numbers on what is not filled at this point.
Right. I just looked at your website and looked at the things.
And I'm
Hi,
going to
Mayor
ask,
Boatwright.
yes, I'm going to ask Ms. Boatwright to respond to that, Mr. Cohen. But if I might, with regard to the administrative assistants, there was a study that was done in 2005 for just administrative assistants within the division by Springstead. and I believe that there were adjustments that were made in compensation at that time just for that group. We have a conversation tomorrow with a representative from Springstead to look at them coming back and reevaluating. And that's about right.
Generally, we do have some positions that were unable to be filled this year, and we do have some long-term subs in those positions, and we do have some positions where the individuals have left since the school year has begun, and we are trying our best to get those positions filled.
Right, and I know you, I know you try your best. But I just want, so the 86 is including the ones that are there, that are being filled by subs or not being filled currently, correct?
Those are new.
Right, so those are new, so that's right. So it's we're hoping to find roughly 140 or so, 120 or so spots. Cool, thank you. And I'll defer so that I don't take everybody's time.
Okay. Ms. Mauer?
So in looking at some of these 86 and a half positions, a couple of questions I have, and the Director of Facility Planning, Design, and Construction, the Furniture and Equipment Coordinator, there's two there, but what is this 1.45 capital projects to school operating conversion?
Ms. Mauer, could you identify what page in the budget book?
I'm sorry, page 20, position
Thank
summaries.
Good evening. So we have current capital project personnel paid out of capital project funds, and we want to convert them and move them over to our operating funds so that we're not, using bond money or other debt to pay for those positions. So if we can pay for them out of our operating budget and using recurring dollars for their salaries, it gets them out of the capital projects fund.
Okay, so from so essentially, what you're telling me is you guys have been burying additional positions in bond funding using 30-year bond funding to pay for operating expenses?
Well, we have positions in all of our funds. So we have other positions in our grants fund, our school nutrition fund. There are a very minimal number of positions in our capital projects fund.
So are they, those additional positions, are they identified in this budget?
There are no new positions in those funds.
Okay,
These
but
are
are the
moving those positions.
the
These are
FTEs
existing FTEs that we're moving into the operating fund.
Right, but are those FTEs, additional people, already identified in this budget when we look at the funds?
In those funds, yes.
Okay. And so why, if we're converting 1.45 in capital projects to operating, I'm assuming that's going into the construction department, and you've got two additional, are all those in construction? You're adding essentially 2 and then converting 1.5?
Correct, because the 1.45 are already existing. Those aren't new bodies.
Okay, and the furniture and equipment coordinator, what does a furniture and equipment coordinator do?
So we're a large organization, Ms. Mauer. We have a lot of resources distributed throughout the schools. We believe that this position will capture some savings for us in how we manage those resources, whether they're desks or any other type of furniture across the division. We need a more systematic way of making sure we know what we have available to us in inventory and how we might be able to repurpose that across the division to avoid making unnecessary purchases.
Well, if you're looking at savings from that, it's an addition, but why can't you just contract that out, allow them to pay for the cost? I mean, it sounds like what you're
Would
talking
certainly-
about is just getting rid of surplus furniture, and somebody could just do that on consignment, and then you're not adding to the budget.
Not just getting rid of surplus furniture, though, but making sure that we're making effective use of those resources within the division. So you've got School A over here that's looking for 5 desks, and you've got School B over here that's got 5 desks to give. We want to make sure that that's a coordinated effort so the other school doesn't go out and purchase 5 new desks when there are resources elsewhere in the county.
So you're telling me you don't have an effective inventory system now?
I'm saying we don't have an effective way to manage those resources,
Okay.
which is different from a system to track them.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, ahead, Ms. Shelton? Did you? Okay.
I didn't realize we were rotating. Sorry, I was writing some notes. I'd like to go back to the briefing earlier. And one of I think you guys very effectively have told us what your requirements are. But what I didn't get out of this, and I was hoping to see, was some way of prioritization. Because you guys have very strongly told us that the quality of education that we want to improve is driven by the facilities, the capacity for the schools to be able to have that, not necessarily driven by in teacher salaries. And so I didn't see anything in here that gave us criteria of how did you sort those. And so, for example, why that was important, and we're going to be asking you questions, is because it looks like these positions really aren't driving quality of education. At the end of the day, that's what I care about. So can you answer that? How did you determine your priorities for some of these things?
If anyone wants to jump in, please feel free. You're talking about the other categories that we
No, I'm
had?
talking about the whole budget, because when you do budgeting, you want to determine, I mean, we all want everything, so I have to be able to say, what are my priorities, and then have some kind of trade space to say, okay, at the end of the day, I can't go buy this house that I want to buy. I can buy the house, but I can't put outlets in every room. You know, you have to have some priority of what you're going to have in your budget. That's a weird analogy. I'm sure you guys can think of a better one that just quickly came up to my head. So.
Well, traditionally, that process of prioritizing, basically cutting back, comes after we receive the state funding and the funding from the local government. We recognize if this, you know, the budget will likely not be fully funded, and then the work will come back to the board. We have an approved budget, which is this budget, and then we will adopt a budget after we have all our funding, and that budget will have, you know, the cuts in it.
So how are our constituents supposed to know what's the most important thing for their kids?
I think if you look at page 11 of the budget book, it lists the school board budget goals and priorities.
But it's not crossing over to the questions we're asking. You know, like, for example, Ms. Maurer was talking about the construction, the increase of this construction and the move of those. Like, I can see in here there are some things that you've moved around, and I assume that those are things for, and I'll just throw this out. Like, for example, I saw some movement on your IT services and printing, and it kind of looked like you guys were changing the way that you do things within your organization. So those things are easy to see that I'm managing my checkbook differently. But what I'm looking for is, why do you have this amount of money? Why is this position more important than anything when we say that we need teachers, but yet there's all kinds of positions in here that we're adding? And I'm going to let me just find this page. And this is just an example. And I'm sure you guys have really good reasons, and that's why I'm asking, because I couldn't find anything that gave me the criteria for your selection. And let me find the page. What page did I tell you? Do you remember? 57? Yeah, it was 57. And this is just an example. On page 57, there's an increase in supervisors. Currently you have one, now you're going to, it looks like maybe 3 supervisors. And so that was an increase of $247,000. And so I looked at the span of control, and I didn't see that. And then I tried to compare that back to I'm just saying, this is the way my brain thinks. I tried to compare that back to your accomplishments and your goals, and that didn't play into that. And then if I went all the way back to, like you're saying, I went up page 13, I didn't see those connections.
Yeah, I had similar kinds of questions when I went through the budget book as well. And I met with Chris Fulmer to ask him quite a few of those questions. So new positions that are listed are new positions, but throughout the budget book, you'll see people have been moved from one place to another. Their sort of some reorganization has occurred. And so it's, from my understanding, it's not an actual increase in positions. It's just somebody has been moved.
But wouldn't you expect to see that in the goals? I would expect it to go, hey, man, we're going to go do this, and this is why that would be my goal for my department. That's why I'm asking. I just didn't see any connection there. So if you guys can help me with that, that'd be great. I'm not trying to take all the time.
If I could just speak to one thing about I will say one great thing that we have done as a school board is to create the Finance and Budget Committee, that we really work on the budget goals and the priorities, and we start that process in the summer. I think that we have, and very clearly stated, that employee compensation and student achievement, reducing class sizes are priorities. And I think that, I believe, and I'm sorry, I brought too much stuff, almost 9 million of our 13 million goes to compensation and people. We are 86%, I believe, focused of this budget on people. So I believe that we do present a very people-focused budget, because in my opinion, that is the way we deliver our best services to our students. So I'm just saying, our budget goals and stuff are what we give to the superintendent and say, look, these are what are important to us, for him to start running the numbers for us and doing different things. And so I would say that our compensation and, this is very much, I believe that Dr. Benson, in his initial one to us, really tried to do a pretty good job with what we gave him, because we give these, to him in October and say, we want you to create the budget based on what the board thinks is important. So I actually think it doesn't mean we may not improve on the process, but there was not that process for a long time.
If you don't mind,
It's actually, we could probably go through each one of those in the book, but I think the bigger question was not that, but what is the prioritization? What subjective, or it looks subjective, sorry. I'm joking to death.
Well, if you don't mind.
What objective?
I'd appreciate
what
it if he could speak
no,
to
it's-
that, because that's now the second question on movement. So
Okay.
If you don't mind, Ms. Shelton, just from a high level, they're not necessarily reorganizations. It is, as we're budgeting now within Munis and we have the position control set up, it's getting individuals that are already employed here coded to the proper budget code. So there's a little bit of shifting, but page 19 is where we show our total positions, how many teachers and how many we're adding. That's the true reflection of new positions added in the budget. So on page 57, which you referenced, we're not necessarily adding positions there or reorganization of the department. It's just a shifting of folks to get them in the right budget code per the state classifications.
Just quickly, to get off the question, I just want to make sure that we're answering the question of priorities. So there are, on page 12, you'll find the school board priorities. These were put in front of the board and voted, built in the FAB in the finance and budget and voted on. Priority number 1, establish a funding agreement with the Board of Supervisors. Okay, that's a priority for us to figure out, hey, how much money are you guys going to give us every year? Is there going to be a percentage? Right? Number 2, teacher and employee compensation. Continued attention to teacher and all employee compensation is necessary to continue to improve teacher and staff retention and recruitment. We talked about that at the briefing. Special emphasis and attention should be given to compensation levels in FY19 to ensure concerns of teacher and staff retention are addressed. Number 3, implement priority staffing standards from our approved staffing plan. When I came on the board 6 years ago, staffing plan, we didn't have no such thing, okay? And so we've come a long way on trying to get after what is the proper staffing and what is the proper metric for all of our categories. And like I said, we've made a lot of gains on the elementary school staffing, where we have a max of, I believe it's 28 in normal class and 27 in normal class. And then, of course, we have K through 3 and class size reduction standards from the state. But, just getting after the metric of 27 students in a class across 17 elementary schools and 15,000 young children, that takes people, right? So, fund additional teacher staff support in priority areas, re-examine social services delivery, differentiate distribution of resources among schools with large populations, based on the number of student populations, instructional curriculum program personnel alignment, standardized budget building process. The goals and priorities are step one in that process. And monitor spending and revenue, particularly salary lapse, so that we can get a hold of that issue we had a couple of years ago with coming up with a little bit too much salary lapse, right? So I just want to make sure that the county and the folks know that we do have school priorities. They're on page 12, and they're voted by the budget folks right here, and they're voted by the school board members. Goal is something that I kind of want to do. Priority is what we're going to do first. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cavalier?
Good lead in there, Mr. McCosker, because I'll keep up the theme of priorities here. And Ms. Decatur on the way in mentioned that she wanted everybody to be nice today because of her condition. So we don't want to have anything extreme happen to her while we're here. And because I'm such a nice, sensitive guy, as always, not as much as Dwayne there in his pink shirt and tie, but one of the priorities that I've always had is the pay, and certainly that's something that we have long discussions about every year. And I've always been in favor of pay parity on both sides of the street, not just amongst the school system and then separate for the county employees or vice versa. So I noticed there's a bit of a discrepancy this year. You all have asked for the 2.5% COLA. Tom's gone with the 2% COLA, and then there's some market-based adjustments that we have a pool of money from too. So, but I think, I usually don't say this, but I think the schools have it right this time. I would advocate us increasing to 2.5% to match your 2.5% this year, and for us to be able to find, it's not as hard as for us to find that extra 0.5% because we have far less employees than you do. But I just would like to put it out there right now that I am very supportive of that pay increase. Thank you.
Can I say something as well? I appreciate your saying that. I think we also need to remember that last year, the majority of our teachers got no pay increase. They got no COLA whatsoever.
Ms. Chase, can you please state that again and say it a little bit louder?
Sure.
Thank you.
Am I louder? I just said I appreciated what Mr. Cavalier said, and I just wanted to stress that our teachers, unlike county employees last year who got a 2% increase, that most of our teachers did not get a cost of living increase last year.
I will say, Mr. Cavalier, that everyone was nodding on the board. I thought I saw people nodding when you were speaking, so that's a good thing, I think. But I do think that that's important that we do keep parity with it's 2%, it's 2%, it's 2.5%. We think it's 2.5% for us, and we would love to be lockstep with you on that. I mean, I would love to see us lockstep, so we don't have that parity issue.
Mr. Cohen?
I think Ms. Young wants to say
Ms.
something.
Young.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to mention, I know you asked earlier about the budget and how it pertained to our goals, but just to remember that there's several departments that need the funds to run their departments, and it bubbles up to making sure that the students, all the students and the teachers are taken care of. There needs to be some kind of equity across the board. So all schools need to run smoothly, not some, and in some spaces or some areas, but all the schools. We need to make sure that they are running correctly. And we need to compensate these teachers. We can't miss out where the teachers are going north or they're going south. We want them to stay right here. And remember, we are one of the largest employers in Stafford County. We are the second behind GEICO. The administration, police officers, all their kids go to our schools. Of course, number one is safety, but number two is education. We want to make sure that they have a good education. I've been living in this county for over 30 years, and the schools are good, but we want them to be better. We want them to be the best. And for that, it takes some money. Okay.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, I'll change the subject slightly, and I'm going to give you a list of things, not that I won't use the language that I'm not asking you to make comments or to ask questions, but I don't expect you to be able to answer these at the top of your heads either. But one, there was a disconnect between your budget and our budget as far as format, and that was very challenging. I think Mr. Fulmer pointed out that there's certain things in one place and not in another. Mr. Foley made a point of putting things in there so that you knew if it was coming out of one department but shifting to somewhere else where it would be, so that we wouldn't have to go and take Mr. Fulmer's time by sitting down with him. Also, in Mr. Foley's budget, it had a nice little capsule of sort of explaining why things differed, so that if somebody looks on, and I spent all weekend once I got this Friday night, part of the weekend, going through page by page, but if I saw 24 technology teachers disappearing from one category, there'd be a little blurb that say, yes, but they're going somewhere else, and that would have made it easier, and I think it would have helped with some of the questions. But if you could, at some point, hopefully soon, let us know what our one-time expenditures in each area. That's something that Mr. Foley has been very good about, making it crystal clear, so that when we look at something, we know it's not a reoccurring expense. Secondly, there's I was going to say a boatload, but Ms. Boatwright might not like that analogy. So there's a large number of non-contract staff. And so, and I'm not quite seeing it, if we're increasing the number of paraprofessionals, why do we have an increase of, and I'm not going to look it on here, but I think it's 22 or 24% of non-contract paraprofessionals or something. And I don't understand why we have increases in non-contract staff when we're hiring more staff. There, and this I will be specific, page 30. Which is classroom instruction 61100, and it's line 30033. We have a legal services category that's going up by $98,894. And if also in the budget is to hire a new lawyer, I'm not sure why, A, we need to put it here, and B, well, how that fits in the classroom instruction. So there's some disconnects in those things. And on a different subject, because I may never get to talk again, I have a feeling Ms. Baumke's going to hit me. The CIP discussion this afternoon was very frustrating. There was no enrollment projections. There was no really an explanation as to why. The superintendent a couple of weeks ago at Mr. McCosker's town meeting explained this new concept, and I was sort of promoting it because of the theory of it, and then we got here today and there was just no details, and it was very frustrating. And so if there's going to be new ideas thrown out into the public realm, it'd be nice if we got to know about it a little bit more in depth. So if we could get that information, I know that would help us in our deliberations. I mean, the two largest areas that we deal with in your realm are the budget and the CIP. And this we got Friday night, and the CIP thing we got Friday afternoon, and then some more stuff last night, and it just was really frustrating. So,
I'll take that
Mr.
one.
Cohen.
I'll take that. Oh, go ahead.
Well, if I could just address two of those issues. First of all, the legal services. So there's a difference between the contracted services that we use, for example, to support any challenges that we might have in the area of special education, and what general counsel might provide to us in terms of helping with policy and such. So having somebody on staff is not going to completely do away with our need to be able to contract services for very specific kinds of support in the organization. With regard to some different scenarios around CIP, it was my understanding that there were 5 scenarios that were shared with supervisors. Is that not correct?
yeah, there were.
Okay.
But the rationale and the data and the depth of it, I mean, I'm fair to say there was a great number of questions from our side of not knowing why, where, how, and who. And so, yes, there was some information, and what I'm saying is, people can hit me if I'm wrong, but there was a great deal of consternation that it was not enough for us to actually do anything.
I appreciate that clarification.
I'd like to speak to that as well. Beginning in February, on February 2nd, we sent an email to the board asking, or to Mr. Foley, asking to create and have a CIP meeting in February, because we felt that since that December meeting, changes on your board as well as ours, we needed to be talking face-to-face, because I think a face-to-face meeting, I very much supported this CIP process. I am not exactly ecstatic about how it's gone since we left in December. And in February, we asked for that meeting for 3 weeks, and then it was canceled at our, because we were told, submit information for the 3 members of the FAB to review, and we'll get back to you, and we'll talk about it in March. I think March was too late. I think this is very late. The FAB, we asked how many times. So I'm just saying, I think I would rather be in a meeting situation with all of us sitting down saying, December was a start. However, there were changes made at that meeting. A lot of stuff got redone. There was new board members on both sides coming in. It seemed like we needed to meet before then. And that is frustrating to me personally, because there was a lot of information. So I just would like to say, I do believe that this board reached out to try. I will send you all the emails.
Yeah, I mean, as the board chair, I'm not aware of what you're talking about regarding a CIP. So,
Mr. McCosker and I will forward the emails that we received.
Okay.
Mr. Dudenheffer, you're chair of FAB, so you would have received
That's
the
what I'm
request.
trying to get to the microphone. I might be getting old and don't have a good memory, but I did not see an email, and I'm the chairman of our Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee. So I'm not sure where it went or who answered or replied to it, but I had never saw that email. And you know that I would have, where I
Madam
would have
Chair,
been on it, so.
one point of clarification. I think that this topic came up actually at the Joint Schools Working Committee meeting about having another oversight committee meeting, and I think there was not full agreement on that. So I think even having conversations with some board members, I think there was full agreement on the need to do that. And in the midst of all that, we were still trying to collect data to help analyze the options, and that analysis went on as late as last week. So I don't think that was anything more than trying to get some good information before the 2 bodies got together to even talk about it. And you all provided some direction today, again, about whether you thought another oversight committee was the right way to do that. So I think that's the only points of clarification I would put forward.
Yeah, and I would agree with Mr. Foley. I mean, he did apprise our board that there was information from our side of the street that was sent over to Dr. Benson, and then you all sent it back. Our staff had additional questions. It was sent back to you all, and I think that's what he's referring to, is now there was still additional clarification. Because we were trying to understand the ADA numbers. As you know, there have been a number of revisions many times, and that's really driving the Fredericksburg Christian School decision. And now we have the discussion of a Ferry Farm rebuild, a Heartwood rebuild, high school 18, and we're trying, and elementary school 18, and high school number 6, as well as the wedge for the courthouse. So we have a lot of moving parts, and it's all data driven. And the decisions that we feel we need to make are all based on how accurate is that data, as best that we can do, and so that's where we're coming from. So let me just go back. I do have a couple of questions. And so if I'm looking at page 12, the second to the last paragraph, I'm trying to speak into the mic too. Under standardized budget building process, I'm just trying to understand what you all have done. It says at the very end, including a targeted zero-based budget approach for designated program areas. So that to me means that you used zero-based budgeting in certain areas. So as I was going through the budget book, one of the things that kind of I found of interest, and I have questions about, if you look at page 110, and it really doesn't matter, pick the elementary school, 108, 109, 110, 111. If you look at the instructional line category, For example, for Anthony Burns Elementary on page 108, they have two different instructional lines. One's 32,000 for the fiscal year 19 approved, and then if you just go across to Conway Elementary, it has 12,002. And these numbers, but then below that is other educational supplies, and these numbers really jump around for each elementary school. Falmouth has 36,000, and then Ferry Farm has 28,000. And then the same thing for computer, paper, and toner. And at first I was thinking, well, maybe that's because some of the schools are Title I schools. They might have more expenses rather than others. So can somebody help explain how these are driven and... Okay.
So, Ms. Momke, the allocation for individual schools is driven by the enrollment at the school, and the schools receive a per pupil expense, right? And then they determine how it is that they want to use those resources within their building, and that's why you have some discrepancy between what you might see at one school versus what you might see at another school. But they all receive the same amount in terms of the base allocation on a per pupil basis. The amount is different elementary, middle, and high per child.
Okay.
And then there'll be
So I
Title
guess
I.
if I wanted to look at if, let's just say Conway Elementary uses 15,000 a year. So you're not doing zero-based budgeting. They're given a certain allocation, and then they're allowed to use that money however they see fit in their curriculum in that building.
Well, in order to provide materials and supplies to support instruction during the course of that year. So, at the high school level, what you're talking about are, chemicals for a chemistry classroom.
Right.
Or expendable materials that you might be using in a biology class. Or other things that might be used in classrooms across the division. Some of our schools place a high value on purchasing additional technology at the school level, so you might see them putting it into a technology line to purchase additional Chromebooks for use in classrooms.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Bomke, I understood that to be also there's so many different variety of programs in each one of our elementary schools, from our Title I schools, may need different materials for different classes, and so, but that's a good question.
Okay. Ms. Maurer?
So a couple of data items that I would like to see is, so one of the things that we do is we're like, all right, we're adding X number of teachers, and it seems like we have celebrated adding large amounts of personnel every year, and I'm still stuck on this 86.5 personnel when I felt like we played catch up a couple of years back. So if you can do me a favor, and again, another spreadsheet, is provide a fiscal year 17, this is what was approved, and then also important is this is how many people we added. So if you look at what was approved and then the adjusted amount, there's like 30 people difference. So what we thought, we were budgeting for or sending across the street, and then there's an additional 30 people. Well, when you add that additional 30 people, that goes into the base budget, and not necessarily something that we agreed to the year before, understanding that some of that money comes from the state because you get additional state funds for the additional average daily membership. But if I can see, the number of personnel, the number we added in fiscal year 17, what we added mid-year of 17, and also how that tracked with the average daily membership, that would be incredibly helpful to me. And back on, having a meeting on the CIP in February, we spent a year talking about the CIP, and we talked about this at the joint schools meeting, and we were provided numbers in September to do our planning for what we were going to do for the CIP, and we had a significant number of meetings on it. We talked about it, we vetted it, and then in December there was this surprise new set of numbers, which again, I'm a little concerned about, because everybody kept telling me that the September numbers were good when one of my colleagues kept questioning the numbers. And so if the September numbers were so good, why did they change so much in December? But to change mid-path while we're in the middle of a budgeting cycle, it's just extremely difficult. And so an emergency meeting, which again, I still it's difficult for our staff. And we did come to some agreement, or some gentleman's agreement, that we would use one set of numbers a year. Those would be the official numbers and then the trending numbers for the next year planning process. But to change the horse mid-stride is very difficult, especially given the complexity of not only the budget, but also the CIP. And so I appreciate that you guys are constantly revising your numbers, but when we do this mid-year, we'll never get a decision done because, well, it's 60 days later. Do you have a new set of projections that, now we have to take into consideration? We'll never get the vote done. And so we really need to come to some sort of agreement on this planning process that is a year long, that we have a set of numbers. And we work with that set of numbers, and then the next following year, we're working with a new set of numbers, and we can adjust our priorities and change. But that's one area where I do find some consternation, and hopefully we will get better in this next budgeting cycle.
If I could speak to that, we did, or I was only an alternate on the CIP. We did say we would go only with those numbers. However, it seemed disingenuous on our part because it wasn't the numbers that changed, it was the capacity only at the elementary school. It was not the numbers. It was, we now need to show you what is really happening in our elementary schools. That was done in the fall because that's when we got to that. We were struggling with the pre-K and how those numbers were impacting. So we did bring those. I did not advocate, but I was not a full member of the committee, that we changed midstream, but to not share them seemed disingenuous as well. Why would we have gone through that to show what was going on in our elementary schools? I believe, hopefully going forward, now that we've created that, the board made a conscious decision to say, we got to look at these elementary schools differently. They got to be on a program capacity basis. I may, and a couple members know, there may be a school or two that I think we may need to look at program capacity because of the special programs housed at a middle school and high school level that we might need to, on just a very, specific basis. But I think the school board is very much trying to make sure we are creating a full picture of what's going on in our schools and to be accurate, so that I believe we need to be in a building phase. Most of you know that, but I want to make sure we build the right thing. And so I hope that, I too believe this was a learning year on the CIP. Hopefully we take all those lessons going forward, because Ms. Maurer, you and I both, I think, believe in this process. So I hope that we can use the best data possible and we move forward. But I would like to just say, it was not enrollment figures that changed, it was how we looked at capacity.
Okay. Yes.
So, and while I appreciate the program capacity, at some point program capacity is somewhat fluid. And the reason it's fluid is you can choose to take a preschool program and put it at Rock Hill Elementary School where you have capacity, and take it out of Hartwood, giving you more program capacity in Hartwood Elementary School. And if we look at the Fredericksburg Christian model, you're okay with busing, north and south. And so it's not that we're trying to keep all the kids located in specific areas, because if we look at your solution in the Fredericksburg Christian, you have to buy into the fact that it's okay to, bus them to two specific locations. So while I appreciate the program capacity discussion, that program capacity is also extremely fluid based upon decisions on whether or not you intend to place the preschools, which seems to be the driving factor here, into those schools. So you could literally, not saying you are, artificially inflate capacity or artificially, inflate crowding at one school based upon the preschool program. Not say you're doing that, but it's one way to kind of look at it, that if we just move the preschool program, that it would open up the capacity at maybe some of our overcrowded schools. And that's just, one of the, I understand the program capacity and I do agree with it, but it is still fluid.
And the pre-K program is a requirement for us. It's not a nice to have or a way to help with the budget, a way to balance. That's one that we are mandated to require. Other programs. But It is, but we still need space for it, and unfortunately, so, anyway, but it is a required program. I just would like to say it's not something we just are it's a great thing that we're doing, but we have to do it.
And Ms. Mauer, I'd like to comment with respect to the numbers. Really what we need to look at is the overall capacity of Stafford County Public Schools, and that is not going to be manipulated. I mean, the overall capacity, and you and I have talked about this, and, looking at all of the elementary schools and sharing the programs, but overall, when we look at the program capacity, it's to show how much room we have in Stafford County Public Schools, in addition to the individuals. But I don't think, and I appreciate you saying you're not suggesting that they're manipulated, because they're really in an effort to be transparent, with respect to what we have.
Mr. Dudenheffer?
Wow, I've been gone 6 years, and I feel like I haven't missed a meeting, so it's But I had a meeting with Dr. Benson and Ms. Hazard in your conference room back in January, shortly after I got on the board. And most of the same presentations were made and stuff, but we discussed some issues that were hard issues in that I brought up, and I don't see any effort to address those. And if you remember, and you showed the chart this afternoon, is we have been requested to buy into paying teachers market. I mean, can I see a head shake on that? I agree, and I've come out and said that I agree we should pay better than market. But we have issues where if you look at the chart, if you're over 11 years, you're already above market. And as the years go out, you become even greater above market. So you're asking us to buy into market up to 11 years, but ignore market when we get above 11 years. So my question is are we addressing that so that when we talk market, we literally are really talking about market salaries?
I don't think we can lower people's salaries.
I've never asked,
But
okay.
so what happens with the market is that up until 11 years, those individuals are at or below market. After, is it 11 or 13 years, people have, with former step increases, they're above market. And so we're not going to penalize them by taking salary away from them, so they just sort of stay above market until they retire.
I think there should be a plan to equalize. Let's get to the market if that's where we are. I'm not asking you to lower anybody's salary, but even in the military, we cap salaries and where they are. So we have teachers who are making, again, as you get further down the line, that gap gets wider and wider and wider. So if we were to commit to a small percentage above market across the board, would we have a problem at that point? Would you need more money to get the under 11 year teachers above market? So I mean, we I don't know. I don't want to call it making a mistake. I mean, I know these teachers. Some of them are great. They've influenced my own children. I mean, I understand that, but we have this issue where we're being asked to buy into half of a program, and that bothers me. And that I think we should have some, and we have people graduating into that program, and so we're perpetuating it into forever, because we're going to continue to have people rising up above market instead of us equalizing it. Go ahead.
Well,
I'd love to hear the answer to this.
Well, one point though, when you talk about market, our goal right now is to get to the median of the market. So we're not above. Our goal and what those charts show is the median of the market. Is that not correct? Our goal ultimately would be to get to the top. Now, if we were comparing ourselves to the top of the market, I dare say it may look a little different. Maybe that's something we could do just to see how it looks.
Well,
But, we're trying to meet the median of the market, not to be at the top at this point.
The two people that were in the room when we had this discussion are not speaking here. I mean, I think.
I'll take that. So, no, that's a good point. the human capital planning for folks in any large organization is a difficult business. And so the $1.8 million is we've already addressed what the median of the market is for our comparison divisions and of course some of those divisions are the same ones that you use on the Board of Supervisors for items Mr. Foley uses. So we've got that $1.8 million in order to get to the median of the market at that 0 to 11. And then we have a 2.5% COLA in order to keep up with, because remember, that market line is always moving. So once we do hit the market, though, the median of the market, that's when we can have a true conversation about a long-term plan on how do we take care of the retention and the recruiting and retention and our senior folks. So the way we do that and in the human capital business is we give retention bonuses, we give recruitment bonuses, we do whatever we can to keep the folks on the line.
That skirts around what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm trying to address a long-term problem where there's no plan to fix it. And we now have teachers that get into above that line, and we're going to continue to perpetuate that. We're not, and I think that there should be a cap, and we should have a plan over 10 years or whatever, but that we bring everyone in compliance exactly the same way. Otherwise, it's hard for me to buy into market. I mean, it seems like you're asking me to, the lollipop here, what are we taking? I don't know.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, and we could look into that. But also remember that, like Dwayne said, that market, our median of the market is North's lower of the market or Loudoun's no market. And we're always going to try to meet. By the time we get to our median, we're behind. So I do understand. I hear you. And we could also look at that. And hopefully, eventually, individuals are retiring. But at this point in time, we just need to get there. Am I boring you?
I have no questions.
You looked at your time.
Okay,
Mark?
I mean, I made my point. I think it's valid.
Mark,
And,
did I
I'm
bore
sorry.
you? You looked at your time while
no,
I was talking.
I know we're going to end. I only
Okay.
have a half
All
hour.
right, I just
before
wanted
the
to make
meeting
sure
ends.
you weren't
We have a
dismissing me.
7 o'clock mandatory here, so.
Sure.
Yes, I'd love to hear Dr.
Thank you.
Benson's.
Mr. Dunhaffer, thank you. So we've not discussed capping, right? And that is something that some organizations do. They cap at some 20 years or whatever that number might be. I will say that if the board stays with this model, that the market is going to catch up, okay? And it will gradually correct itself over time without us doing, as long as we stick with the model. The strategy that we're using is not dissimilar from what's being used in local government. Percentage across the board for everybody, targeted enhancement based upon where we are out of market. So I don't think we want to say that during some period of time we would expect employees to get some percentage across the board increase that might be representative of a COLA, depending upon where they are or not where they are in longevity with the organization. But I do think that over time it will correct, and that line will kind of flatten out. It will hit the median of the market over time. I don't know that the median of the market is going to remain the target for the board. You heard board members discuss perhaps it might be something else, could be bottom top quartile. I don't know. There are certainly other strategies that we could look at that would be enhancements to our compensation model generally that would kind of move us even further into the 21st century. The previous model we had was very much a last century model, and we're not keeping us competitive.
Okay, just wanted to bring up the point. Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate you bringing up the point too, because we want to be responsible with our spending. But I think it's also important. This was a conversation that we had. Just to add, since we're in this conversation, that this is kind of where there is some discrepancy between the boards. We could go back and forth on this all night, and so I do think that in future years it would be really important for us to be on somewhat of the same page as far as what our priorities are as joint boards for our school division. Do we want to be at the median? Do we want to be at the top? Where do you guys want to see our school division? Because ultimately, we're not going to get anywhere alone. So that's also a conversation that I'd like to see us have at some point.
Okay, one last question, if I can. Come on, waited to the end here. We haven't addressed or talked about the big gorilla in the room, which is the most recent issues that we're facing. At the last Joint Schools Committee meeting, I thought we left with some head shaking that, you know, we needed to really look at what it is we want to spend our money on for school security. And we talked about resource officers, we talked about all kinds of things, but I believe we left our meeting there, and I can remember specifically that, you know, we were told that they thought maybe the money could be better spent on mental health issues or counselors or whatever. And then less than a week later, we get a resolution that says, you recommend that we hire a resource officer in every school. And that may be the right answer. I'm not saying it isn't, but over the top of the sheriff creating a task force to try and look at all the various options that we have. I mean, we have lots of examples and resources from the Virginia Tech shooting, a lot of different places where we've done that, but you've now bumped that thing over to us, and it's going to affect our bottom line on everything. I mean, you know, that's a $2.2 million request, and we're already however many $1 million apart on our budget, and now, you know, in my opinion, it was kind of a political move to throw it over the fence at us, because we're going to, you know, now we're under pressure to provide that. And if to do that, we're going to have to come up with that $2.2 million, and it's going to affect the whole bottom line on where we go with this. So I don't know exactly how we ended up here, but I'm a little disappointed that we're not waiting for the sheriff in conjunction with schools and with experts from all over and the evaluations of every school, that now we're you know, we have this resolution that was sent over and sit in our lap. So anyone who wants to talk to that, and I'll shut up. So
Thank you, Mr. Dudenheffer. No, that, you know, awesome question, and it's an important question that we've been talking about. Okay, I'll deal with that. But since we're both budget chairs, right? So, you know, this came fast and furious to all of us when what happened in Florida, and it was a horrible one more horrible event. But the realization that the Stafford County School Board and the staff and all of us together in some of our committee meetings came to realize is we have to do something, and we have to do something. We have to do it now. As evidenced between just today in Maryland, a school shooting and a resource officer actually took the guy out before he can kill more babies, right? So, security is a phased approach as I see it. You know, the first phase is to make sure that, and this is what I've said during my tours and the listening tour and the Ferry Farm tour. Hey, listen, the first thing you need to do is you need to upgrade or examine your physical security equipment. Right now, we have earphones at all schools where you have to show your badge before you get in. Most folks have the security vestibules where it's a double lock entry. And then you have to look at your processes. Those are the things that you can do like right now. Make sure we're doing the right processes. Make sure that kids aren't egressing out of the school at 15 doors at once, so then people can walk in. Those are processes that you can do right now. The second thing, when we talk about school security, are we really talking about the kids stealing a wallet or the two folks getting in a fight? Or are we really talking about a mass casualty event where a crazy person comes in and kills all our babies, right? And that's where a school resource officer with a weapon and a badge is the only thing. But that's the second phase.
But you totally missed my question.
And then the third phase is a mental health. Looking at it, a long-term phase is a mental health. How are we going to deal with the mental health of our kids? And that's more of a long-term phase. I see it. So it's a short-term. An intermediate would be the resource officers. The intermediate fix, because you still have to hire them and they still have to go to the academy and get trained. And then long-term is mental health.
Okay.
All
right, thank you.
I haven't had a chance to
Hang
speak
on
yet tonight.
One second. Mr. Cavalier. Go ahead, Irene.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I'll start off with, I think I understood this. I'm not going to speak for the rest of the board, that this was supposed to be, bring us something that we can consider. Not, we expect you guys to pick this up and run with it. The SRO program, if anybody was there that night that the board members spoke to what happened in Parkland, what I said at the end of my statement was, I want our fabs to take a look at this. I want to really look at how we need to have the SRO program set up. I don't necessarily just want to pluck an officer or a deputy and put one in every school and just call it a day. Let's look at the needs. Let's look at the, what is the program supposed to do? Are they supposed to be, getting to know all of our children, developing relationships? Do we need to have 2 at every high school? Do we need to have any at the elementary school? Those are the things that I suggested we put out there for us to take on later on as 2 boards, maybe to address in the joint schools committee. Not something that we have to jump on right away. We were asked to bring you guys, let's work together we gave you a resolution that says, hey, let's talk about this, let's do this. So I wasn't necessarily asking you to, cough up $2.5 million tomorrow. This is just something that for us that we need to talk about. We're letting our public know we want to start making some more improvements. You guys asked for our help, and we want to work with you. And that's what the intention of. That's why I voted for it. I can't speak for the rest of the board, but that was the intent of myself and my vote.
I'm not so sure that was the word.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Egan. Okay, Mr. Cavalier.
And I'll just follow up on that and kind of have the last word on that before I go into the questions that I was going to talk about. But the sheriff has formed a task force for this purpose only. As chairman of the Public Safety Committee for the board, he is going to be briefing us on the progress of that task force each and every meeting, and you all are welcome to attend those meetings and hear what that is, because I said I'm not going to take that off the agenda until we've had significant progress, and come to us with funding requests as you deem necessary, and we'll address those as we do, because there's at least 4 guys in here that know more about security than any one of us. So I don't want to talk and waste our time talking about school security at this meeting. There's another forum for that, and we'll let the experts take care of that one. Now, getting back to what I was originally going to talk about was, with regard to my first comment about the COLAs, Dr. Chase pointed out that, well, some or most teachers didn't get a raise last year. Well, there's only one set of people in here who can give raises to the teachers, okay? And that's all I want to say about that. But I need people to understand this, because they come to us every year asking for raises, and no matter if it gets written in the newspapers, online, it goes to the SEA, the general public just, for some reason they like to blame the board of supervisors, but we don't get to make the call on who gets what percentage raise. So that, I want everybody to be clear on that one. Now, getting down to the things that Tom brought up earlier with regard to the CIP. There's 2 big issues on that one that personally I'm having issues with. One, the Fredericksburg Christian School and the purchase thereof. There's a price tag on that. There's a renovation cost associated with that. And then there's the intangible that doesn't get brought up. I believe, at least, that even with the renovations, it will be a substandard facility. It will not have all the amenities of our current schools. And therefore, the parents of the children who attend that school may not like that very well, because we have parity problems in the schools as they are, and they're full up standardized schools supposedly. So now we're taking a private facility, turning it into a public facility that it was never intended to be. So I just urge you to use caution before you go any further with that. The second big issue I have, and this was an agreement I thought we had at the December joint meeting, was that we would look at capacity over renovation. And Dwayne, you're going to get mad at me on this one too. So the rebuild of Ferry Farm Elementary School is a no-go for me in any way, shape, or form, because it doesn't add it's not something that's going to give us that big of capacity issue. Hartwood Elementary School, yeah, it's in the wrong place, and until we put a rebuild of Hartwood Elementary School in a place that has water sewer, then I think we do that. But so that gets priority over Ferry Farm. Yeah, maybe do some renovation at Ferry Farm, because it is an old school. I understand that. It's a different situation than Moncure. It's not this north-south parity thing anymore either. So people need to get over all this. So those are the two big issues. I need to be convinced on both of those to be able to support anything.
Can I speak
just
quickly
need
to
to-
that? Oh, go ahead. You go first, Jamie.
I want to speak quickly to your first point, Jack, because I've been the one who has said over and over again that you guys did approve a budget last year, and we were the ones that had to cut the 2.5% COLA. It wasn't that you guys didn't fund it. You gave us a lump sum of money, and we didn't provide the COLA, right? So that's what you're getting at, and that's exactly right. I just want to make it very clear, though, and Ms. Maurer, you've asked for the list of compliance detailed out, but if you recall on the earlier presentation, there's a number over here, and that number is our compliance. And if we're funded with anything under that number, it's going to be really hard again to find that 2.5%. So again, it's not that you guys aren't going to fund the 2.5%, but it's that we're going to have a really tough time finding that. That's a large bulk of money, right? So,
Okay.
If I could react.
Thank you.
I know. Just to respond, first and foremost, the CIP options that were sent to you all have not been approved by this board. So to say that this is an approved, those were options that did not come to our board for approval. The only thing that came as part of that vote was those maintenance and other projects. So we can disagree, but how it was voted and how that agenda item reads, it was just for the attachment, not the CIP. We did not have that before.
CIP has not been voted on by your board.
It has not.
Okay. Do you plan on voting on that as a board?
I
And if
can't
so,
speak to that.
when? Who, Ms. Healy?
That's certainly something we can bring to the board. I don't know where we are in the process with the joint committee, with this whole new process that we have, which we believe is a good process to have, but we are in a growing stage. This is the first full year, I think, that it will be in place. So if you're asking us to have a vote on that, we can certainly put it on our agenda. But I'd like to find out where we are with the committee in terms of, asking for input.
Well, I
from
guess
the
I'd have to
school.
ask my board, are you all comfortable voting on a CIP that the school board has not voted on?
And if I could just go a little bit further to,
In the essence of time, hang on, Ms. Hazard, 1 second. Need some head nods. Do we want to have a joint meeting, the joint 3-on-3, to discuss the CIP? Otherwise, when we see our CIP, we're going to be voting on it.
Well, I'd be more comfortable if the school board voted on a CIP for the schools.
Right.
Because
right.
if they don't, if we don't do what they say, and I hate to say this, politics is gonna get involved in it, and the Bengals can get pointed right at us. So they need to vote on it.
Okay.
Nice to get the information.
And Ms. Bumke, just to further clarify, the way the process was supposed to work was that December was when we came to a joint recommendation, and then we were supposed to go back to our respective boards and get an approval. If you look at the little flow chart, and they're at that point of getting approval from their respective board.
But
Sending
now
it
they're
over-
saying that they don't have a CIP. So I guess you all need to get together as a board and have a CIP that's voted on by your board.
Based
And then
upon the
send it to us.
recommendations that came out of the December meeting.
We have a CIP. I think the question is, where are our priorities? Is that not the question? Where are our priorities among that CIP? We have a capital improvement plan. We always have one. We have traditionally called it a living document. that
Right,
is
but has it been
subject to
voted on
change.
by your board in this budget cycle?
The new thing was that we got today.
You mean since last summer when the budget cycle, our budget cycle starts in July?
Right, but typically the school board would approve their CIP in January, February, or March.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, and we're really bumping up. I know the deputies have to get us back over.
Yeah, I guess what the question is that this new iteration that was shown at the town hall meeting 2 Thursdays ago, that we received some information on, but not the depth of it. That's what we don't know that you've looked at, heard of, and Ms. Hazard saying we haven't seen it. I think that's what we're getting a complete disconnect.
Right, and that CIP document was not, that was for a town hall meeting. That wasn't for the school board. You have something to say?
Mr. Cavalier, Jack, if I could just say, when you talked about Fredericksburg Christian being worried about what it looks like, right now our kids, a lot of our pre-K kids are in the Melchers facility, and I have to tell you, if I had to pick between those, a Fredericksburg Christian model and Melchers, Fredericksburg Christian is a step up unless we ever decide to put a lot of money in there. So I'm not quibbling, but we have some old buildings as well.
We have a hard
I'm sorry,
deadline,
I
but
just
I'm,
wanted to make a
I'm,
comment.
as the chairman of our fab, let's have a meeting. I'm fine. And maybe we can hash these issues out in a smaller working group. I'm fine with that.
So I want to lastly just thank
Just me?
everybody for
Can
coming.
I just have one.
30 seconds.
30 seconds, one thing. Mark, in reference to the question that you asked, Miss Wendy still had given us a list of items that we needed to look at and get back to her on. So we were still working on that. So I'm good. Yeah, and then
Okay.
secondly, in reference to Jack, in reference to Ferry Farm, the renovation is going to take 3 years, and the cost is as high as getting a new school there. But in addition, there is lead and asbestos that these kids are living with in that school system. So,
Okay.
so that's moving them out, though.
So lastly, I just want to thank Dr. Benson. When you came here, we had 30 schools in the division, all doing 30 different things. And you finally have us as a school division, not 30 schools, part of a school division. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you for everybody for coming.